Okay guys, what's going on? So I came up to the park just to get on a slope, just to provide as much precise visual context as I can, talking about 4 components of efficient hip rotation mechanics. Not to overcomplicate it, but just to give you as much context as I can possibly give in regards to things that I'm looking for within the mechanics of hip rotation. Okay, so the first thing that I'm looking for is the hips continuously sinking throughout the drive phase. Again, remember, the drive phase is the phase in which we descend from peak leg lift, and then we talk about with the drive leg mechanics, absorb, produce, and store, and then as soon as we then start to move laterally, that is the drive phase, the period of time in which you're driving up until you anchor down into the ground, front foot strike, okay? So I'm looking for, do the hips continuously sink with the slope, all right? So the slope is going to help us aid in our acceleration rate. Right, we're the only overhead athletes that has the ability to throw on a slope, so we want to utilize the slope, we want to utilize gravity and allow gravity to influence our acceleration rate. Meaning, if we continuously sink our hips, right, so if you saw the posture of my hips at the starting point, it should be going down like a staircase almost, like boom, boom, boom. I can show you some screens of that. Because now as we continuously sink throughout our drive phase, not only is our force application into the ground, we're utilizing the ground to produce power, but we're also influencing our acceleration rate by way of continuously sinking our hips into the ground as we anchor down. Okay, so that's one thing. Obviously we'll dive into more of like the breakdowns when we do a separate video on the potential breakdown of hip rotation mechanics, wherein we don't do that when we either elevate our hips, or we have a false perception of power, and so on and so forth. So then 2 is obviously the timing of when the hips initiate their rotation. So for me, I believe that contrary to popular belief in regards to delaying rotation, I believe that the hip rotation actually is initiated somewhat early. Now this is going to vary for individuals who load their drive leg a little bit differently, and it's also going to vary per individuals who have an ability to evert the ankle compared to guys that just have that foot rotation. Okay, it's going to vary just a little bit. We're talking milliseconds, but the hips are going to initiate the rotation early, somewhat early. I'm looking for, I can't give a specific timing because I think there are some differences, but we'll talk more about this as we go on. But as we absorb, produce, and store at probably the center point of your drive phase, your hips are going to then initiate that rotation, and then that leads us into the third component, which is positioning your hips accordingly at anchor point. So wherever or whenever your hips initiate the rotation is going to be answered when we then position at our anchor point, position at front foot strike. Because if we can get our hips somewhat open, not fully open, but right around a 45, so if 90 was fully open and then 0 was fully closed or just neutral, I'm looking at 45, because then we can allow gravity to influence the completion of the rotation, which then pulls the trunk through, and so on and so forth. So I'm just looking for the third component is positioning our hips accordingly at the point of which we anchor down. Okay, this is often a breakdown of byproducts of late hip rotation, or defying gravity with hip coils and so on and so forth. But third component, positioning the hips accordingly at the point at which we anchor down, so then we can create authentic separation through segmentation. And then 4, not often talked about, but this is going to be in regards to hip extension, so not necessarily the rotation of the hips, but having the ability to have hip extension through ball release. All right, so for me, this gives me a good indication if the athlete has fully transferred drive leg energy all into the front, so then you won't see the trail leg get into active flexion. That's also an instability issue. So when we look at like the kinematic sequence of applying energy into the ground and getting that energy that we've applied 100% back up through the chain and out through the fingertips at ball release, we need to make sure that we're getting into hip extension, maximizing hip extension to do that. Okay, so those are 4 components of efficient hip rotation mechanics, and like I said, there's a little bit of discrepancy in regards to one, how you load the drive leg, quad dominant hip hinge guys, and then two, do you have the ability to evert the ankle, or are you a foot rotation guy? That's going to look a little bit differently, but very, very minute. It's not going to be a huge difference. It's just going to look very subtle. And just to provide some more context on that, I can do a separate video and do a screening somewhere down the road. But those are the 4 components that I see fit to have efficient hip rotation mechanics.